So, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Minata, and I am with the Northeast Farming Association program in Massachusetts. I am excited to be here this morning for the second part of a four-series course developed and presented by the Western by the Western Mass Food Processing Center. So, this program has been founded by the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TAP. TAP is a USDA program, 3 years program that we have been working on since 2023. I am very excited to be here and I welcome everyone. During the presentation, if you have any question, you can put them on the chat and we will address it at the end of the presentation. So I welcome Kate and Liz from the Western Mass Food Processing Center. And Kate, I will let you take it from here.
Amazing. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. And I'm actually here on my own. Liz is going to try to join us a little bit later. Liz had a little motorcycle accident last summer that she is still dealing with. So she ended up at a doctor's appointment this morning. But let me go ahead and share my screen and then I can introduce myself. But I want to make sure that this works first. Okay. Can everybody see that? Go ahead and
Yes, we can see it, Kate.
fabulous. Okay, awesome. All right, great. So this is actually workshop 2 in a 4-part series about launching value-added products and certifying them organic. So just to orient you all to where we are, I imagine that some of you were here with us last week, but we may have a couple of new people as well. So today we're going to be talking about the riveting topic of regulatory compliance. And there's a lot there. So bear with me as we get through this content, and I look forward to questions at the end. Talking about the state and federal regulations can be difficult in my experience, and so I'm happy to take kind of specific scenarios at the end. Like, I'm making this and I'm trying to sell it this way. What do I need to do? Sometimes it's almost easier to work through it as an example. So we can do that at the end. I'll save some time. And then next week, so I had the first 2 workshops, and the second 2 are going to be with Liz, who's the director of operations at our food processing center, and those will be specific to organic certification. All right. So here's what we're going to be covering this morning. So we're going to talk about the different product categories that exist, sort of in regards to shelf life and shelf stability. We're going to talk about where you can make what, so where different products can legally be made, including in residential kitchens, on-site farm commercial kitchens, and then we'll talk about what co-packing is. I'm going to introduce some of the 2 federal regulatory bodies that regulate foods, and we'll talk about some of the regulations that apply to packaged food products. And then sort of thinking back on the different food categories, there are different permits that you need to make specific types of food products. So we'll talk about that. And then we're also just going to talk about some of the policies that you may need to put together and record keeping that should happen around making packaged food products. And then lastly, we're going to talk about labeling. So quick introduction of our organization, for those of you who weren't with us last week. So I'm with the Western Mass Food Processing Center, and we are a food business incubator and small batch co-packer in Greenfield, Mass, although we do serve the region. We are mostly set up to make sauces, condiments, and beverages. So like really hot liquid going into a bottle or a jar is what we do very efficiently, although we do a couple of other things here and there. And then we do a lot of counseling and technical assistance for food product businesses around all of what we're talking about today. Shelf life, food safety, regulatory compliance, how to scale a product. And this program, I do want to mention, is part of a larger nonprofit organization called the Franklin County Community Development Corporation. I misspelled it and have forgotten to go back and correct that. But that's who we are. And Liz and I both work here at the Food Processing Center. And so you'll meet her either later today or next week. And then this is a slide from last week, but I did just want to revisit this quickly just to sort of define what it is we're talking about. So when we're talking about a value-added food product, there is technically a USDA definition for this. I'm not going to go into that whole definition, but I sort of put these into two categories. I put them into the traditional category of things like tomato sauce, pickles, pestos, salsas, jellies, jams. These are all value-added products that I think consumers are very familiar with. Um, they're great because they've been done before, and so they're not difficult recipes to develop and scale. They're very familiar to consumers, and they're a great addition to a farm store, a CSA, kind of an existing line of products. The concept that they're competitive, right? Lots of farms and other food producers, non-farms, are making these types of products, sometimes featuring locally grown ingredients. And then always manufacturing may or may not be challenging, kind of depending on what it is and what manufacturing infrastructure is available in your region. And we can talk more about that. And then the other sort of value added product category that I think about is sort of the newer and more innovative and interesting ideas. So these are examples from our region in Western Massachusetts that farms are making and that are doing well. So things like a ginger or elderberry syrup, a jardinara. We have someone doing a dehydrated butternut squash noodle. So again, taking, raw ag product and turning it and processing it and packaging it and turning it into a value added product. These newer ideas, I think, are exciting and innovative again. There's not as much competition around them, and they can be based on a crop that you either grow really well or have a surplus of. However, manufacturing of these products can be difficult. Again, kind of depending on the infrastructure. Has it been done before? Is it so new and innovative that the processing infrastructure doesn't yet exist and you have to build out your own space? So a possibility, it's depending on the product. And then sometimes the market development can be difficult. If it's a product that is unfamiliar to consumers, you might have to spend more time in spaces demoing the product and kind of getting in front of people and having them try it. So overall, this is kind of what we're talking about when we say value-added product. And we'll talk about the different categories, but this is anything from a dehydrated herb to a pickle to a syrup to a frozen berry, anything that you're growing and processing. This was a kind of framework that I introduced in the last workshop, and I just wanted to revisit the product development life cycle. And as farms considering doing value-added food products, you're entering a new category. And so I want you to be thinking about yourself as a part of this sort of new industry, which is the consumer packaged good industry. And so all of your decision making really should be based on the fact that there is really confirming that there's a market for your product. So we talked about this last week, confirming that there's consumer demand for the product and sort of basing the way that you develop the product on what you believe consumers want and how you think they're going to use that product. You start with a product concept and then eventually turn that into a prototype. And then from there, you scale that up and commercialize. And we talked a lot about this last week and sort of the ins and outs of going from making a gallon on your stovetop to commercializing and making 50 gallons or 100 gallons of a product, sort of the challenges that presents. You evaluate that, evaluate does it scale and also does it still taste good? Does it still work? Is the consistency still right? And this process can take a little bit of time. And so we talked about bringing in outside expertise. If you're not the culinary person, getting someone on board who does have that background, who can help you create something that people will buy once, but then also come back for. Thinking about shelf life, and we'll talk about product categories, but thinking about, is it shelf stable? Is it not? How long do I have to sell it? And then ultimately moving into a cost assessment. So doing a cost analysis around what does it cost me to make a unit of this product, and then how should I price it, both based on the cost to make it and also what competitive products are pricing at. And then,
Kate,
yeah,
I'm sorry to cut you, but
that's okay.
yeah, I think you still have the first slide on the screen. It is not like we are not progressing with you.
You're not. Oh,
No.
all right, hold on. Let me just pause for a minute and see why that's the case. Oh, I think I may know. Hold on. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, let me Let me try this again, and if you could tell me if it's progressing, that would be so helpful. So you guys were just looking at this first slide the whole time?
Yes.
Now can you see it?
Yes. Now
Oh
we
my
can
God,
see
that's
it.
so weird. Okay, I'm so sorry. All right, well, that's okay. We'll get through it together. We talked about learning objectives. We talked about the food processing center. We talked about these different value-added product categories, and this is where I am now, just looking at this framework. So it is helpful to visualize it, I think. Um, okay, and so the last piece is just around market distribution and how are you going to sell the product. Um, and we're going to talk more about that piece, the sales piece, in a moment. So because this is a group of farms, I did sort of want to distinguish between thinking about post-harvest activities like washing of a green, packing of a green, and compare that to processing activities. And so we'll talk about this more later. The FDA is one of the federal regulatory bodies that regulates packaged food products. And these are their categories that are designated as processing activities. And I just highlighted here the ones that I feel are relevant to you all. So any sort of cutting, coring, chopping, when you're drying or dehydrating to create a distinct commodity. So an example here is like drying a variety of herbs, chopping them and blending them to make a herb blend, and then freezing. And so I get these questions a lot from farms of like, is this a post-harvest activity and therefore doesn't necessarily need to happen in a commercial kitchen space, or has it moved into the category of processing? And so this is not an exhaustive list, and I can link in the chat at the end where I got this information just so that you can read it on your own. Um, but processing activities always include the things on this list and therefore need to be done in a commercial space. So two really important questions for you as a business owner to answer, really kind of at the beginning of this food product journey are, what is the product? And we talked about this a lot last week, but getting really clear on the product description. What is it? So an example would be, well, there's a bunch of examples that you can see here, but there can be variations on these, right? You could make a tomato sauce and not have it be shelf stable. We see this a lot with simple syrups. People make simple syrups both as refrigerated products and as shelf stable products. And so getting really clear on what it is that you want to do. And that is going to determine the regulations, both state and federal regulations that apply to manufacturing it. So that's something to get clear on. The second thing is, where are you going to sell it? And so this is this is really important. Are you planning to sell the product direct to consumer or retail? So often that word is used for direct to consumer sales at a farm store or a farm stand, at a farmer's market is also in that category. Or are you going to be selling wholesale to stores, to institutions, to other farm markets? If that is the case, you're going to be regulated by the state, and we're going to talk about that. So really important to get clear on these two things kind of at the onset, and that's going to help you determine which regulations apply to your food product. Okay, so let's talk about what you can make where. This is obviously like one of the most important initial considerations for your product concept is like, can you get the thing made? So there are a variety of things that you can make at home in a residential kitchen under cottage food laws. And cottage food laws do differ by state, but they tend to be mostly the same. And they allow for the making of things like baked goods that don't need to be refrigerated, jams, jellies, and then certain dried products and dried blends. And so those can be made again in a residential kitchen under the cottage food laws. And those are inspected by your local board of health. Everything else, for the most part, that is not kind of in that first category of food products has to be made in a commercial kitchen. And a commercial kitchen can be any shared commercial kitchen space. It could be your local church, your local Grange, a community center, any sort of like shared kitchen hub that you can find in your community. There are a lot of these. I find that they're affordable, they're available, they're in every community. The biggest limitation is that they tend not to have sophisticated equipment. They often don't have a lot of storage space, especially cold storage space. And it can be challenging to pass state and federal inspection in a shared kitchen like this. And we'll talk more about that. A third option is to build a commercial kitchen on your farm, right? And we've seen a lot of this. And those are kind of regulated in the same way that a community kitchen would be. The Board of Health comes in and does an inspection. The fourth option is to hire someone else to make your product for you. And we'll talk more about what this means. We touched on it a little bit last time, but this would be hiring a co-packer or a contract manufacturer to make your product for you. What's nice is it lets you offload the production side of things and actually focus on selling the product and running the business. They often have more sophisticated equipment. You can do larger production runs. And so it's a great option if you're at a scale that makes sense for. And then I talked about our food processing center. So we're a good example of a food business incubator. Again, we're a nonprofit organization. We're here to serve businesses as they're starting and scaling. But there are many of us across the country. There are 3 to 4 really great food business incubators just in the Northeast. So that's another option that can often be at a better scale for a new business. Okay, so to get back to the kind of the residential kitchen for a moment, I think it's most people's hopes that they can start in their home kitchen as a way to save money. But there are many things that can't be made in a residential kitchen. So just spelling those out here. Um, the big one that I think is often people often think you can make these products in a home kitchen and often do for a while are acid and acidified food products. And so we'll talk more about this food product category. We talked about it last week as well. It includes things like tomato sauce, hot sauce, pickles, salsa relish. So I often find that people are making pickles at home out of a residential kitchen. That's just a very common one. And then like later find out that they weren't supposed to be doing that. And so transition at that point, which is fine. But none of these can technically be made in a residential kitchen. Um, you can't make anything that requires refrigeration or what is called TCS, temperature controlled for safety, anything fresh cut, a spread, like a cream filling in a pastry, a custard. Can't do a low acid food. So if you think about a non-acidic like canned green bean or canned corn, that requires more advanced technology for manufacturing, usually not available at a small scale. That's why you don't see these types of products available from small local businesses. So those can't be done in a residential kitchen. And then of course, meat, poultry, seafood, and dairy. Really, residential manufacturing is for very what are considered low risk, shelf stable items, cookies, jellies, jams. Okay, so now I want to talk about this second option that I introduced, which is making your product in a shared commercial kitchen space. Um, Again, anything that falls out of cottage food laws must be made in a commercial kitchen. They're also regulated by the local board of health. So it's the same entity that kind of comes in and does an inspection of a residential kitchen and then also a church kitchen if that's where you end up. It's a great option if you're planning to make a product and sell it direct to consumer at your farm store in your CSA, if you're really planning to remain at a small scale. You can get a state wholesale permit for a kitchen like this, and we'll talk more about that. It just tends to be difficult to do and time consuming, and I'll demonstrate why later in this presentation. There are several food product categories. I introduced these last session. So these product categories that are considered high risk, right? We talked about acidified foods. We talked about juice. We talked about meat. We'll talk about all three of those again today. The manufacturer of those foods has to have special certifications. And so the acidified foods is a great example of that. So that's not to say you can't make these in a commercial kitchen. You would just have to, you yourself or whoever you're hiring to make them for you, get that certification. And we'll talk about why wholesale sales out of a shared space can be challenging, although very possible. I've seen lots of people do it. So I just wanted to also talk again about the idea of a co-packer. Again, someone that you're contracting with to make your product for you. How this works is it's your recipe and your process typically, right? You're doing that development. They're helping you to scale it up and get it manufactured at a large scale. So you go in, you teach them how to do it, and then eventually you're kind of just entirely outsourcing that to them once you feel like you have a trusted relationship with them. They often do the ingredient and packaging sourcing for you, which is nice. And so it's your recipe, but like once they have that recipe and know how to make it, like you can sort of leave all of the work to them. I will say, in contrast to that, our small food incubator here, we do not source ingredients and packaging. That is something that anybody working with us has to continue to do on their own. So there is maybe a distinction there that I just want to name. I think the ingredient and packaging sourcing can be really helpful. Although sometimes they only have a few sources that they work with, so your options may be limited in terms of what they can get in. What's really nice about a co-packer is they maintain any required certifications to make high-risk food products. So if you're bringing a pickle to them, they're going to have the certification required to make that product. So again, it's less work and less money that you need to spend. Co-packers are going to be more efficient at whatever it is they do, right? There are co-packers that do baking. There are co-packers that make sauces. There are co-packers that do meat products. They typically focus on a category or two. Um, and they have the right equipment to make those products really efficiently. So hopefully that brings down your costs. And again, allows you to focus on all of the other aspects of running your business. What's tricky about co-packers in my experience is that they usually have really high minimum order quantities. So they can maybe make your pickles, but you're going to have to make 10,000 units every time that they make it. And so like, can your cash flow sustain that? Usually not with the folks that I'm working with. And so it can be hard to find a small co-packer, although there are some, and I'm happy to talk offline with people about specifics for your idea. We talked about ingredients and packaging. The other piece is just that sometimes people have a hard time finding a regional co-packer, and so they have to go further afield to a place that is like a far drive or even a plane ride from their home. So that's mostly true with non-farm food businesses that I work with. But sometimes you're working with a co-packer on the other side of the country, and that can be really challenging in terms of developing a relationship with them. So I wanted to revisit this slide from our first session, which is just these various product categories. And for the most part, when I'm working with farms, most of what they're trying to do as value-added food products fall into one of these categories. So acidified or acid foods are the big one. Many, many things fall into this category. Again, they're shelf stable because of their acidity. They're typically filled hot. Water activity controlled products are another category. Think hot fudge, simple syrups, honey, products that are cooked down and therefore the water is cooked out of them and not available for pathogenic growth. These are also often hot filled. And then we, have the category of baked products. So any baked goods, granolas. These are also technically water activity controlled, right? We're baking them and drying them out. And then we have refrigerated and ready to eat things. So for farms, like I always think pesto for this category. And then anything like a hummus, a dip. We're seeing many sauces, people making sauces that are refrigerated these days instead of shelf stable. There are ways to extend shelf life for these products. I'm not really going to get into that today, but these are just a few examples of that. And I think the big one is like when you picture yourself opening like a pesto container, it has that plastic seal that you rip off. That's an oxygen barrier. So there are little strategies for extending shelf life if you're thinking about doing something refrigerated. And I'm always talking with people about how can we get the shelf life longer so that you have more time to sell it. Often with a refrigerated product, that just means freezing it and then slacking it out if that's possible for that product. Fermented food products is another category that I find a lot of farms making products in. And then, of course, frozen. And again, sometimes you can freeze something like a pesto and sell it frozen to a store, and then the store can actually thaw it out and sell it fresh, which I think is a really great strategy for around shelf life for that kind of product. Okay, so these are the two big federal bodies that regulate all manufactured and packaged food products. So the USDA regulates meat, poultry, and eggs, and the FDA regulates everything else. So most of the people that I work with are being regulated by the FDA, and we'll talk about how this gets enforced, what the regulations are, and how they get enforced. So I wanted to bring back up the three most heavily regulated food categories and just talk about those again. So what these are is meat, and we'll come back to this, juice, and acidified foods. Again, most things that folks are making fall into acidified foods, but I do want to talk briefly about meats and juices as well, because there are quite a few extra steps that you need to take as a manufacturer of these products. So meats, again, are regulated by the USDA and they're subject to USDA inspection. So there's a heavy sort of inspection presence when it comes to manufacturing meat products. Examples include things like bone broth, sausages, meat pies, jerky is another big one that comes up a lot. So these have to be produced in a facility that is approved by and inspected by the USDA. And what's different about meat products as opposed to pretty much everything else is your label actually has to be approved by the USDA before you can sell that product. So that's just an additional step in the process. That's not true for other food products. Other food products labels do not have to be approved. They do have to comply with the regulations, which I'm going to talk about at the end of this presentation, but they're not approved prior to sale by a regulatory body. So some of the additional things you have to do as a maker of meat products, you should participate in a HACCP training. HACCP, I was sort of torn about how much I wanted to talk about HACCP, but just due to the nature of how much time we have together, we're not going to get really into this, but there are trainings on HACCP principles. HACCP is a way to ensure that you're making a safe food product, and what it stands for is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. What you're doing as a manufacturer is looking at your production process and thinking about points at which hazards might arise. So an example is if this ingredient is supposed to be stored cold and it isn't. Time and temperature abuse of a cooked food product, things like that. At what point, what are the points in this process that are really critical to this product landing on the shelf safely, including how it's distributed? So that is like the very short description of what HACCP is. I would encourage anybody making a meat product is going to be required to go ahead and participate in a training on these principles. And then you will use what you learn in that training to develop a HACCP plan for each of your products. The other big deal thing with meat products is that you are required to have a USDA inspector on site for every production. And so you'll have a heavy inspection presence at your facility. And you have to provide them a space, a desk to work at. There are some exemptions, and this is really important for farms. So there are retail exemptions for producers that are making products on site in a commercial kitchen and then selling them direct to consumer from that location. So for example, here in Greenfield, we have a cow farm that processes and makes a variety of sausages, and they sell them from the farm, from their farm store right there on site. And that's retail exempt and does not require USDA inspection to be on site for every production. Sometimes these exemptions are also extended to farmers market sales. So if you're like manufacturing in a commercial kitchen on your farm, and then you're only taking those products directly to the farmers market in your town, that will likely be considered exempt as well. So juice functions somewhat similarly to meat, although not quite as cumbersome of a process. But juice products are considered to be higher risk than other product categories. This is anything from like juicing a berry to juicing a vegetable to making apple cider. These aren't regulated by USDA. This is also FDA. But you are required to put together HACCP plans just like you are for meat products. So again, you should participate in a HACCP training. You have to develop a HACCP plan for each of your products. And then for both meats and juices, you have to maintain careful production records. This is really true of manufacturing, for manufacturing of any kind of food product. But there will be, again, like increased inspection of juice products and meat products. So the FDA, the USDA, will be aware of you and inspecting you more regularly than other food products get inspected. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say here. There are, I guess the other thing I didn't put on the slide, but I want to say is there are also retail exemptions for things like cider being made on farm and sold direct to consumer from the farm. And so I don't have a lot of information on like the nuance of the exemptions here, but if you're considering a product in one of these categories, you should definitely look into those. What's great about the USDA and meat manufacturing is they have a wonderful agency called the Food Safety Inspection Service, FSIS. And they have like an online platform where you can go in and pose questions. So if you are making a meat product, that's a great resource. Not true for juice necessarily, but I'm happy to talk offline with people considering juice products. And this is, I guess the last thing that was on my mind around juice is just that these regulations also apply if you're like juicing something that is then going to be an ingredient in another food product. So just be aware of that. Okay, so the big one that I want to spend a little bit more time on is acidified foods. I imagine that many of you have product ideas that fall into this category. Condiment, a sauce, a beverage. The basic science behind this is that you're combining a non-acidic ingredient with an acid ingredient, or what we call an acidifier, um, to create a shelf-stable product. So you're reducing pH, you're filling hot, and those two parameters are that's the science behind what makes these products shelf-stable. So an acid ingredient can be lemon or lime. It can be citric acid, which works really well because it's so consistent. It can be vinegar, um, any kind of vinegar. So any of these products can be the acid ingredient that decreases the pH of your product. If any of you are working with a pH controlled or acidified food product, a really great starting point is to just get a pH test done and see where you land. At our facility, we mostly work with products who have a pH of under 4. And so if you test it and it's significantly higher than that, then we can have a conversation around, all right, I'm going to need to lower the pH in order for this thing to be shelf stable. Can I do that? Is it going to compromise the nature of the product, the quality, the flavor, whatever it is? And should I be considering a different route? Should I be considering a refrigerated product instead as a way to preserve that product quality? These are considered higher risk due to botulism. So that's sort of the why behind the designation as a higher risk food category. And then there's some work you have to do before you can sell these products. And that is to obtain what's called a scheduled process for each acidified food product that you're planning to make. You obtain a scheduled process, which is a document, through a process authority. So this is usually a lab, a certified lab that can take manufacturers through this process. And what they're doing is they are confirming that your processing parameters actually do result in a shelf-stable, safe product. So again, those parameters are pH and temperature. And those two things kind of correspond with each other, just to give you a sense. So like the lower your pH, the lower your fill temperature. Whereas if you have a higher pH, you might be required to fill at a higher temperature. So working with someone like us at our food processing center or another food business incubator or co-packer, they're going to be able to help you navigate those parameters, pH and fill temperature, to make sure you're in the right ballpark before going through this process of working with the process authority. So as a part of the process, you will get this thing, a scheduled process. It is a document. It says, this person is making this product. This is the pH. This is the temperature. This is the type of container that they're using. And then every time you manufacture that product, you have to follow what's in that document and keep careful records around it. There's production records. You make your product, you record what went into it, you record that you took a pH test that day and that you filled it at the right temperature. So the record keeping is a really important piece here. So again, happy to answer questions about this part of the acidified foods process. It takes a couple of months. It costs a couple of $100s. It's always a difficult thing I find to explain. The last piece that I want to mention, a really important piece for acidified food products, is anybody making an acidified food product has to have a special certification called Better Process Control School. I believe this costs under $1,000, but it's not cheap. I believe it's a 2-day class. So you could make a pickle in a church kitchen, inspected by your local board of health, and you would have to go out and get this certification in order to manufacture those. You only have to do it once. Okay, so I talked about the two regulatory bodies, the FDA and the USDA, that sort of set the regulations. And we're going to talk briefly about kind of the law, the Food Safety Modernization Act, a law that was passed around food safety in 2011. But before I do that, I want to just sort of outline the different entities that do the enforcement of the federal regulations. So local boards of health are very involved if you're doing retail or direct-to-consumer sales, if you're processing in a residential kitchen, if you're working in a shared community kitchen in your region. You're going to be working with your local board of health. They'll come out and do an inspection. I really love it when a board of health has a list of what they're going to be looking for before the inspection, but they don't always have that. But get to know them, communicate with them about what it is you're trying to do. The next step up is going to be working with the state. So the state is going to come in when you start to sell wholesale. and they're going to give you a wholesale permit. The name of that sort of varies by state. But typically this is a part of the Department of Health or Department of Public Health. In Massachusetts, it's our food protection program. So this is the state entity that enforces many of the federal regulations. And then of course, FDA and USDA. It's not necessarily true that you're going to be inspected by or engaging with the FDA if you're making a food product on a small scale. Technically, everybody needs to comply with the federal regulations. I have found that they mostly get enforced when you move into the wholesale space and you start to sell to stores and the state comes in and does an inspection. That's when they start to enforce many of the federal regulations. However, for the higher risk food categories, again, thinking back to meats, juices, and acidified food products, there are additional steps that you need to take to register those products with the FDA, and therefore you're going to be on their radar, the USDA, right? And so it's very possible that they might come out and inspect you. So again, just more work to be done for anything in that acidified food products category or a meat or a juice product. They're more heavily regulated, and the FDA is more likely to come out and do an inspection. So just stepping back actually to talk about what is wholesale. In my experience, many people sell wholesale prior to getting a wholesale permit. They just aren't aware that they need to get it, or it's a low priority for them in that moment. But it is important to be thinking about, is this going to be the pathway for me, and what's the state permitting process look like in my state? So these are all examples of a wholesale sale. So making a product that you sell to a local yoga studio or any kind of local store like that, and they're in turn selling it to their customers. Making a frozen blueberry product, selling it to a university, and they're including it on the shelf at the campus store. Selling your sauce to another farm that's including it in their CSA program, or selling a product like a frozen soup to a local restaurant. So all of these are technically a wholesale sale, right? You are selling a product to one entity and they're turning around and selling it again to their customers. So just really important to know if this is something that you're doing and to be thinking about the state permitting process. I'm not saying like if you have a product right now and you are like, oh, wow, I am selling wholesale, like don't freak out. Just start the process of applying for that permit. What's really interesting about the wholesale permit is nobody really asks for it. If you go to your local grocery store, they're not usually going to say, well, can we see your wholesale permit? But you don't want the state to find out that you're selling wholesale and then come in and try to inspect on it and you don't have it. So good to get ahead of it, especially if you're planning to scale into like wider retail and be in things like bigger grocery chains or even like a Whole Foods. So yeah, if you're selling wholesale, you need a state permit. That looks different for every state. So I've touched on a little bit of this already. Again, when people apply for their permit and are scaling into wholesale sales, that's the point at which many of the federal regulations will get enforced, and we're going to talk about what those are in a moment. If you're working with a co-packer, you will be on their wholesale permit. So this is another like benefit to going the co-packing route is they actually have a wholesale permit. The permit is typically based on production, not sales, and so the manufacturer of the product holds the permit. So for example, here at our food processing center, we have a wholesale permit and most of the people that are working with us are a part of that permit. You do have to, at least in Massachusetts, renew this permit every year. It costs, I believe, $300. So it's a little bit of work and there's definitely a cost to it. Okay, so I wanted to just give an example. I'm calling this a case study of what the state asks for when a manufacturer applies for this permit. The application process itself is very simple. I think it's a 2-page document to apply for this permit. However, once you submit that, the state will come back and ask for this long list of plans and policies. This is not a full list. But these are, I would say, kind of the biggest lifts. So we'll talk about recall plans. A transportation defense plan is a document that explains how you're keeping products safe in transit as you're distributing it in your own car or truck. which is usually the case for new startup food businesses. They're going to ask for a food defense plan. So how are you keeping the facility itself safe? An emergency action plan. So this is around like fire or flood, what happens in the facility. So a document that outlines those procedures. SOPs and SSOPs, standard operating procedures, and then sanitation standard operating procedures. So how are you operating within your facility in terms of things like cleaning and sanitizing is really the big one here. What are your practices around that for your facility? Allergen control and chemical control. How are you keeping chemicals away from food? Um, and also like out of the hands of people who aren't working on your production floor? How are you keeping allergen products segregated from each other? How are you managing pests? So anything from like bugs to mice to squirrels to anything that can get into the facility and tamper with product. Um, and then they're going to want to see a batch production record. So I've touched on this a little bit, but they're going to want to see a some kind of record for each of your productions. I think I have a picture of what this looks like for us in a couple of slides, but we have a one-page sheet here that we use. So anytime we make a product, we have a sheet and we write on that sheet what were the ingredients that went in, who worked on this, did we test the pH if that's a required component, how many units did we make, what was the fill temperature, any of those kind of required parameters that we're supposed to be keeping records around. And so coming back to where you make your product, it is possible but difficult in my experience to get a wholesale permit from your state in a shared kitchen space because of the fact that you have to put together all of these things. And this has come up a lot for me recently because most people do make things in a shared space and they've called to say like, how am I supposed to do this in the shared space? And like, is it really my responsibility or is this something I should be asking of the shared kitchen owner? Right. So there's lots of like food hubs, food business incubators these days. That's becoming a more common business model. In my opinion, I would love to see those shared kitchens develop many of these policies and make them available kind of facility wide to anybody working with that kitchen. But we know that that's not entirely possible. So we are a co-packer and a shared kitchen, and we maintain almost all of these things for our facility. And so if someone is manufacturing a product here and they apply for a state permit, we have all of this already. And again, they can be on our permit. However, the things that they would have to do for their own business is the big one is a recall plan, and we're going to talk about that. And then a transportation defense plan. And so that's why I have those two at the top, is those are really specific to the business and not necessarily the facility where they're making the product. So again, this looks different by state. This is what it looks like in Massachusetts. It's a little bit of a heavy lift. And so if people are considering going the wholesale route, I encourage them to start working on this early and start putting together these documents when they have the time. And I can link it here. I have developed I guess this is specific to Massachusetts, actually, so it's maybe not going to be helpful to everybody in the room. But I have developed some guidance and sort of collected guidance from the state and the FDA around how to do this. So there are a couple of templates for things like a recall plan and a couple of other things. So I can share that so people can sort of poke around and familiarize themselves with what some of these things look like. Okay. So the Food Safety Modernization Act. And I want to bring this up because this act, which was a law passed in 2011, is basically guides the higher level federal regulations that all food manufacturers need to comply with. So it really applies to anybody manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding food for sale. So any food hub that's also doing aggregation distribution. So again, this was passed in 2011 to modernize how food safety is regulated. The idea with FSMA is that it's really focused on prevention and preventing issues from arising in food manufacturing rather than reacting to them. It applies across the board to anybody manufacturing food. And essentially, there are three buckets of things that manufacturers need to do in order to comply with the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. And so that's this section here called actions it requires. So it requires food manufacturers to have good manufacturing practices, GMPs, or to be operating in a facility that has a set of GMPs. It requires you to be able to trace your products, and we'll talk about that, traceability, and then also recall products in the case that something is wrong with them, so recall planning. And then it requires you to put together food safety plans for your products. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on food safety plans because there are exemptions, and we'll talk about that. But all of you at this point should be exempt from that part of FSMA. But you're not exempt from the first two. And FSMA includes both produce safety and food safety. So as farms, you're likely familiar with produce safety and how that's regulated. So this is sort of these are regulations. This is the part of the law that is specific to packaged food products as opposed to a raw agricultural commodity. So produce safety and food safety. So you're kind of moving from one to the other as you're taking this step. So I'm going to spend a little time just on each of these three actions to familiarize you with what you will need to do. However, there are classes for all of these things, and I would like, if you're going to put together a set of GMPs, I would encourage you to go take a GMP class. So like this is the bare bones of what the GMPs are, but I did just want to introduce that they're a requirement. So these are GMPs, good manufacturing practices, are basic sanitation and operational standards for your food facility that you have to follow to make sure you're producing safe food. And there are a variety of required categories that you will have to include in your set of GMPs. So they include things like employee hygiene, building and facilities is another section, plants and grounds, kind of getting back to pest control, cleaning and sanitizing, managing equipment and utensils. So I'm not going to get into each of these. There are more categories, but this is a prescribed framework. So it's some work to put it together. It should be a document that is really specific to your facility and your practices, but also the federal government tells you what needs to be in it. And there's lots of guidance documents around it. And good examples to pull from. So it doesn't need to be a super heavy lift. Again, if you're working with a co-packer, they're going to have a set of GMPs, so you won't need to worry about it. But if you're going to try to get your local community kitchen permitted with the state, this is something that they're going to ask to see. They're going to want to see your GMPs. Again, required for everyone, enforced when you make that wholesale transition. There are some really great classes I'm going to try to link at the end. I have those links handy. Cornell Food Venture Center does a great one that we have participated in. So it can be a helpful step in putting these together. Oops. Okay, so recall plans. I think the concept is probably familiar to you all, but I just want to kind of make it clear what it is. So recall plans are going to be based on traceability. I think I actually want to start with this slide and then we'll go back. So in your food making, your food manufacturing, you should be practicing traceability because traceability is the foundation of a good recall plan. And so what this means, and the way I always like to frame this, is thinking one step forward and one step back. So starting with the one step back, actually, this is referring to tracking your inputs or your ingredients. So you may be growing one or two of the key ingredients for your value-added food product. Right? If you're making a hot sauce, you might be growing the peppers, but you're bringing in additional ingredients to make that food product. And so you have to be tracking those. And this is that picture I was talking about. So this is an example of a part of our production sheet that we use daily for any food product that we make. And you'll see that we have a list of ingredients on the left, and then their weight, how much is going in, the recipe itself. And then there are lines for manufacturer or supplier, and then batch or lot code. So on the floor, they are using, say, use the hot sauce example, they're using vinegar as an ingredient. They're tracking the manufacturer and the batch or lot code. Often if there's we can't find a batch or lot code, or we threw away the box and it's not on there, they'll write a received by date, just something to help us track back that ingredient if for some reason anything were to be wrong with it. So it's entirely possible that an ingredient manufacturer could reach out to you and say, this ingredient was compromised. This is maybe it's a big deal, maybe it's not, but you need to recall products that included that ingredient. So you as the manufacturer should be able to look back and say, okay, here's our records. That lot code for that ingredient went into these 3 batches. We're going to need to recall those products. Make it simple for yourself in the case that something goes wrong so that you don't destroy your entire brand based on a recall. So that's sort of one step back. Again, just record keeping. One step forward is sales. So where are products going? Traceability can be tricky if you're selling direct to consumer at a farm stand or a farm store or a farmer's market. It's like there's really no way to do that. Like you're not going to track those people. This is really important as you transition to wholesale. What stores did products go to? So that could be done in a spread. Lots of the people I work with are using a spreadsheet for this. Some people track it like via their QuickBooks, so there's just a record made as they're doing their bookkeeping. Those are the 2 big ways that people track sales. At any point in time, you should be able to say where a batch went and what was in it. Okay, so kind of hopping back. So thinking about traceability as the foundation to a recall plan. The recall plan is your plan for getting product back in the case that something is wrong with it. And again, this is like primarily for wholesale sales to stores, not for direct to consumer sales. So this is your plan for communicating out to buyers and or the general public that there is an issue with your product. And then it also includes how you're going to get that product back and dispose of it or ensure that it is disposed of on site. So the foundation of the recall plan really has to be based on these sort of classes, like how dangerous is the situation on hand. And so these are the prescribed classes. Class 1 being the most dangerous. There's like reasonable chance that people are going to get sick, people are going to die. This is botulism, right? This is like, the biggest of deals. The second class is there could be an adverse health concern. So things like bacterial growth and mold, particles, plastic or metal particles being found in a product. Usually these things are going to be reported to you, right? You're going to find out. A store is going to call and say, a customer returned this product. There was a plastic piece in it. So you're going to have to say, okay, wow, that came from this batch, and here's what we're going to do about that. Here's how we're going to collect that product back and notify all of the stores that have this batch. So again, really based on traceability and being able to identify where products from that batch went. And then that third class is not as serious. This would be the case that like you just didn't follow the recipe and the product is not right. And so this may not be the case for a recall. That's going to be a part of your recall plan. And one of the steps is going to be deciding how serious is this issue that has been brought to our attention? Do we need to recall the product? If so, how will we do it? And so sometimes people recall a product just based on the fact that like it's not right and they don't want this product in their consumer's hand. It's going to hurt the brand or maybe make it so that customers don't come back again for that product, but it's not going to cause an adverse health consequence. Again, I have a great folder of resources for folks going for their state wholesale permit, and it includes information on like guidance on recall planning and also a recall plan template. So I'm happy to share that. We talked about traceability. Okay, so this is the third federal requirement that we saw as a part of the Food Safety Modernization Act. And that is the food safety plan. I've decided not to spend a lot of time on this today because it's not going to be relevant to most of you because you're small businesses and there is a wonderful small business exemption for having to comply with this part of FSMA. So if you're selling under $1 million of product per year, you don't have to comply with this part of FSMA. You don't have to have a food safety plan. But I do just want to touch on what the heck this is. For anyone familiar with HACCP, right? So we talked about HACCP plans for meat products and juice products. Food safety plans are the same thing. They're just a little bit more extensive in the way that they prevent hazards from arising. And so the food safety plan has 2 parts. The hazard analysis is the first part. This is you looking at your production process and identifying, as I said with HACCP, the points of concern in the production. So this is things like ingredient storage or receiving ingredients that haven't been um, temperature controlled, right? You're receiving eggs, but they came to you um, and they weren't stored cold. That could be a point of concern. Cooking time and temperature. So this isn't a great one for farms, but this always makes me think about cookies, right? And salmonella. Cookies should be cooked at what? A chocolate chip cookie, 350 degrees for 10 minutes. It would be a problem if you cooked them at 200 degrees for 8 minutes. So time, temp control, and abuse of that. And then the big one for which I think will be relevant to many of you is for anybody thinking about an acidified food product is pH control. Did we hit that pH that our document, our scheduled process said we need to hit every time we manufacture it in order to guarantee that it is safe? So you're kind of looking at those points. In the world of HACCP, they're called critical control points, and I like that language. They don't use that same language in the food safety plan. Um, but these are points where you need to get it right, essentially, or the product may or may not be safe. So that's the first part of the process is going through this sort of thing of identifying the hazards, a hazard analysis, and then from there identifying how you're going to control those. So it's like the control for pH is that we're going to hit the pH. The control for a time and temp concern is that we're going to hit the right time and temp. It's not rocket science, but it is a lot of work in terms of like putting this document together. So I would encourage people to look into the exemption, sort of figure out whether or not you're exempt. And then if you are exempt, you have to attest to the fact that you are. Um, and so I'm not going to get into that today, but that's something that happens online with the FDA, where you're attesting that as a small business, you're exempt from complying with this regulation. So I guess just going back for a moment to this slide on FSMA, this food safety law that was passed in 2011, those three things are the good manufacturing practices, the recall and traceability, and then a food safety plan. These are federal regulations that apply to any manufactured food products. They often don't get enforced until you apply for your state permit. So if you're going that route, you should be thinking about them. And then many of you will be exempt from having to do a formal food safety plan. Regardless of the exemption, you should still have a sense of what are the things that I need to be concerned about in making sure that this food is safe for human consumption, obviously. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about shelf life. Shelf life is an interesting thing because while food safety is a part of shelf life, it is actually more based on product quality, flavor, consistency, appearance. You, as the maker of your food product, get to determine your shelf life, which is really great. That's not true for acidified food products, unfortunately. We'll talk about that. But for any other food products, you get to decide the shelf life. So you have to do shelf life testing. If you're going to make a refrigerated pesto, you should make it and you should put it in your fridge and you should keep an eye on it. And you should monitor how does it look after a day, 3 days, a week. And then you get to decide what's the shelf life going to be? Is it going to be 10 days? Is it going to be 2 weeks? When should it be pulled from the shelf? When is it going to look icky to the consumer? When is it not going to taste good? When is it going to be different from kind of its top quality? You can share this as a best by date, a use by date, a sell by date. You kind of get some discretion there. Unfortunately for acidified food products, the process authority is going to give you a shelf life. It is typically going to be 1 to 2 years. And then you can appeal for a longer shelf life. And I've seen lots of food makers do this, right? So they may have a product that they know is good for 2 years. A pickle, a tomato sauce, a hot sauce. Any of those shelf-stable products easily have a 2-year shelf life. We know that to be true. It's kind of industry standard. However, sometimes the process authority will give you a year, and so then you'll have to appeal to them for longer. They may want you to do some shelf life testing. Shelf life testing is also just a great opportunity if you're like questioning the shelf life or if you're feeling insecure about establishing your own shelf life, which I find many people are, where it's like, I think it's safe and it still looks good, but like, I'm unsure. Like, this is not my background. I'm not an expert in this. You can go out and get a shelf life study. And I talked about process authorities as these established entities that do acidified food products. Many of these, they're labs, and many of them also do shelf life testing. So I'm happy to share resources. Cornell, I'm always referring to Cornell Food Venture Center. They are a great resource and they do shelf life testing. I believe the University of Maine does the same. And then there are many good private ones. So that's something you can pay for. There's going to be a cost to it. What's really interesting is you can do an accelerated shelf life study, where they can put your product under pressure, whether it's um, heat or light or whatever it is, and they can sort of figure out the shelf life faster than letting it sit on the shelf for 3 years. So that's a great option. Okay, so let's talk about the label. So getting a label on a product is really a three-part process in my mind. There's the designing of the label. What is it going to look like? How's it going to fit in your brand? We talked a lot about that last time. So that's working with a designer usually, or maybe hopefully you know someone who's fantastic and can do it for free. From there, you're going to have to print it. Usually the company printing it is not the same as the person designing it, although some print companies do have designers on their teams. But usually these are two different entities. And then you're going to have to apply it. And I wanted to talk about the application because at our facility here in Greenfield, we have a machine that puts labels on products, and it's fantastic. It does 60 jars a minute. It's operated by one person usually. It's very efficient and does a great job. However, it only works with round jars. And so if someone comes to us with a flask, or something that has raised lettering, like a ball jar, it doesn't work with that. And so it's an important consideration as you're looking into, if you're looking to go the co-packer route, to be talking with them about what are their capabilities in terms of labeling. Do they have high-speed equipment, and what kind of containers can it work with? We talked a lot about the other aspects of the label last time. We talked a lot about getting clear on who your buyers are going to be, right? We talked about value proposition. What is it that makes you more interesting and differentiated from the crowd? And so important just to be thinking about how you're bringing all of that to your label. The label is like really important and also very limited real estate, right? Depending on your product, you may have a very tiny amount of space. But also, as you transition into the wholesale marketplace, like that is the thing that people are going to see. They're not going to see you, your face, your family at the farmer's market behind your table, drawing them in, talking with them. Like they're just going to have, I forget, there's some piece of evidence to say that like in the grocery store, you have like 6 seconds or something to capture a customer's attention. So it's like really important that your label and your packaging do that. So kind of getting to that third bullet, like what is the brand, what is the feeling, and how is that engaging the customers that you have named as your target customers? What's your vibe? Is it fun? Is it craft? Is it premium? And then also getting back to the second bullet here, what are the different product attributes that you are going to highlight? Organic, obviously, is the big one for this class. But are you highlighting clean ingredients? Are you talking about made in small batches? Are you talking about made in New England? What is the thing that you're sort of deciding to put on that label that's going to draw in a customer? Okay, so I promised last session I was going to talk about the actual federal requirements for your label, and so these are they. There are 4 things that need to go on every food product label, and then we'll talk about the 5th. So you have to have a product identity. In this case, I have the maple syrup up here. This is actually an example from our food processing center of a flask that we filled maple syrup into but are unable to label. But we love this product. It's out of Connecticut. So the product identity here is maple syrup. Look, what is it? Is it salsa? Is it hot sauce? It really, like you all know it from a consumer's perspective, you need to be able to look at the thing and figure out what it is pretty quickly. So the second one, net weight or volume. So again, you'll be familiar with that as consumers. You can see at the bottom here, this is 6.8 ounces. There are industry standards for weight versus volume. So there are many things where it's going to be the industry standard for that category that you're using weight for the fill. And then the opposite is true for other product categories. Like the obvious one is like a beverage is going to be by volume. There are some things like hot sauce is a good example of a product that can be by weight or volume. You'll see both. So again, like I talked last time, encouraging people to like go into stores and see what other people are doing and try to stand out while also fitting in. Stand out, your brand should stand out, but also like the product itself should be familiar enough to a customer that they can look at it and understand what it is and whether they want to buy it. Um, your ingredient statement is the next one. This is straightforward. It's your list of ingredients by weight, heaviest to lightest. This includes any allergen acknowledgments. So, right, you're familiar. It might, if it has milk, it'll say contains milk, contains eggs. The fourth thing is the name and address of your business. Who are you? Where are you located? It doesn't need to be like your home address, but it should just be like your city, state, and zip code. People should be able to figure out who you are and contact you if they need to, is what the FDA would say. The nutrition facts panel is something I'm sure you're all familiar with. I don't actually have a picture of it. I should have. This is not actually required. There is an exemption for this. So if you're selling under, I think it's $500,000 of your product per year, you don't have to have a nutrition facts. However, you might want it, right? Depending, again, getting back to that original question I asked around how are you trying to sell this? If you're selling at your farm store, you probably don't need a nutrition facts. Are your people really going to care? However, if you're trying to get into Whole Foods, you're absolutely going to want a nutrition facts, right? It depends on kind of the landscape and how competitive you're trying to be. The same might be true for a local grocery chain. I think it's also product dependent. If it's a product where you think your consumer is going to be looking at sugar, maybe you're making a low sugar jam, low sugar fruit spread. You might want it because you're going to use that as a way to convey the amount of sugar in that product to your consumers. So while you may be exempt, I find that most people want it. The other thing is if you're working with a design and print company to do your labels, do you want to incorporate this early so you don't have to do a reprint later? Just another consideration. You can do the nutrition facts panel yourself using recipal.com. I think it costs $50, $25 or $50. People seem to really like Recipal. You could also work with a consultant to verify that it's correct. So I can make recommendations for that if it's helpful. If you have a complex product, a good example of a complex product would be something that is steeped, like a tea, where you're kind of like putting ingredients in, but then taking them out after the steep. The nutrition facts can get a little bit more complicated, and then I would encourage people to send it out to a lab and do a lab analysis. So that is the short and sweet version of what's required on every food product label. Other things that you might consider putting on the label. We talked about traceability, a batch code. You're actually required to put this on the label. It's not like identified as one of the label requirements, but the FDA does require traceability. And so every bottle should have a batch code that can get printed on the label. It can be a sticker. Here we have a machine that puts it on the cap. You need to identify the batch of that product. We typically use a Julian date here, which is the day of the year. So like the 11th day of 2026 would be 11/2026. So traceability is important. Best by, sell by, we talked about. Weirdly not required, but very much industry standard to include it. Especially for like a refrigerated product, it's going to be really important. One thing I do want to mention, I talked about making a frozen product and then selling it frozen to a store, but then having the store sell it in the fridge. You could work with them to do a best by, sell by sticker. So again, Pesto is a good example. They receive a frozen product. When they take it out of the case to put it on the shelf, at that point, they can put a sticker that gives it 7 days or 10 days. So that's just something to know for that product type. You might have a barcode if your plan, again, is to go into stores to be selling wholesale. You're probably going to want a barcode. Retailers really want that. It's not necessarily required. If you're working with small retailers, it might not be a big deal. But typically they're going to want a barcode. You can get those through an entity called GS1. You might include storage instructions like keep refrigerated. You might have usage instructions like shake well before using. And then we will likely have what's called romance copy, which is like your farm story, your brand message, right? That short and sweet little story about who you are. And again, all of this is going to be dependent on how big the label is. Much easier to put all of this on a box than it is a tiny jam jar. Okay, so I'm going to wrap us up and then we'll leave some time for questions here. But this is kind of my homework slide. So the things I would encourage you to be working on these next steps. So getting clear on what the product is, developing a product description, really thinking about the shelf life here. Identify how you're going to sell the product, and that might be direct to consumer at first, but with a plan to be in stores over the next year. Determine which of the federal bodies regulates your food products. Is it USDA? Is it FDA? Determine whether or not your product falls into one of those high risk categories and start to think about how you're going to comply with those regulations and what that timeline is going to look like, what some of the costs associated with that might be. And then getting clear on the exemptions. And again, I'm happy to talk offline or talk through examples, but you may be exempt from some of the federal regulations, either based on the size of your business and how much you're selling, or how you're selling them, where you're selling them, whether that be direct to consumer at a farm stand. And then as a part of this program, Liz, who you will meet next week, and myself are available to talk about your specific thing. So again, like I'm introducing all of these local, state, and federal regulations here today. And then usually we need to like talk through a specific example to figure out what it is that you're going to need to do. So we're available as a part of this program to do that. And then this is what's coming up next week. So we're going to be really getting into the organic stuff next week with Liz. So we're going to be talking about what is organic, who has to be certified, the different organic labeling categories, and using that USDA organic seal. And then she's going to go through the process of getting your facility certified. And she's going to talk about what that looks like in a shared space, a shared community kitchen. And that is what I have for today. So I will pause and we can look at the chat. And I'm happy to talk through questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Kate.
You're welcome.
And looking at the chats, I don't see any question yet. So if anyone has something in mind, please come forward so Kate can answer or direct you.
Can I ask the questions verbally?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Who are the other food incubators in the Northeast? I'm going to assume you're going to include AceNet.
I don't know AceNet. No.
Ohio.
Should I?
Really, really
Ohio.
great.
Okay. AceNet. I have
Really
to write it
great,
down.
folks.
Okay. So I'm in where am I?
ACE.net.
AceNet. Thank you. I'm in Western Mass.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say regional to us. We love Hope and Maine. They're in Providence, Rhode Island. Actually, that's not true. They're in Warren, Rhode Island, outside of Providence. It's
Hope in Maine.
Hope and Maine. They're a fabulous food business incubator. They have rental kitchen space where you can go in and do it yourself, and they have a really strong co-packing program. So they're fantastic. And then there's one in Boston called Commonwealth Kitchen. They do some co-packing. They're also wonderful. Where are you located?
West Virginia. Southeast corner of West Virginia, much closer to Virginia.
Okay.
Southern Virginia, not DC.
Okay. That's what I know then.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah, there's an amazing organization called the Food Corridor. And it's a platform to find commercial kitchen spaces, including co-packers. Like we're on there. It's how we do a lot of our advertising and recruitment. And so that's a place to go, is the Food Corridor.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
My next question, where are you going to share those examples and plans?
Why don't I put them in the chat now?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
All
Again,
right,
it is Massachusetts based, but it's my understanding that the process is similar across states because that's when they're enforcing the federal regulations that apply to all the states. But just know that it is Mass specific.
Okay. You mentioned USDA, FDA. Where does dairy fit on that?
Dairy is FDA.
Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Are you looking to do a dairy product?
I just, so we are looking to become a co-pack that eventually will be able to do low acid foods as well as acidified and juice.
Okay,
Growing step by step, starting out with your higher acid foods, adding in acidified foods, then adding in juice, and eventually we want to get Dixie canners to be able to do um low acid foods.
cool.
Um,
Have we met?
no, no, ma'am,
We didn't.
not yet.
Okay. Your project sounds really familiar, but never mind.
I believe we might have talked over the phone when Liz was being assigned to us.
Yes, okay, maybe that's what it was. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Um, and what are the label differences for Copac?
Interesting question. I don't know
Because
that
I
there
have
are any.
looked at foods that have been co-packed, and
Yep.
some of them have the co-packers stuff in
Hmm,
it. Some say manufactured by, and some don't list it at all.
true. Yeah, also like you'll see it's interesting. Like I'm presenting the regulations as they stand, and you will also see big manufacturers not complying with them sometimes, which I'm always like, but it's because of the like limited availability for inspections to happen, right? Like we are a technically FDA inspected facility. We haven't seen the FDA in 3 years. Like they don't have the capacity to actually come out every year. That's why the state does a lot of that enforcement. Even then, we don't see the state every year. So interestingly, that does come up. But to your question, what I most commonly see is manufactured for. So a co like we as the co-packer, well, the business owner would do their labels and they would say manufactured for, and then they would have their business name. And then sometimes they have their address and sometimes they have our address. Like if I have someone that's a very small business, maybe using a PO box, like they just don't want the business to be associated with like that city, then they'll just use our address. So the co-packer will, in my experience, like happily allow that. And then the co-packer, I guess the other thing that comes up with labels and co-packing is like batch code. So like we have more sophisticated equipment that can, so people on their label leave a little spot. We talk with them about the label print before they get here, but they'll leave a little spot for a batch code so that we can print it really nicely onto the label rather than stickering it. Because stickering, I mean, it doesn't look bad, but it does take more time. So that's another thing that we'll come up with. So we put the Best Buy and the batch code as this nice little printed thing. Other than that, there shouldn't be any differences.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Kate. So if anyone has any other question, Kate will be happy to answer.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just looking through my slides because there was one other thing I wanted to link for you all. Now I'm forgetting what it was.
Can I chime in with a question?
Yeah, please.
Hi, Kate. Thank you. Lots of great information there. Wondering about setting up a on-farm commercial kitchen and where we're processing chestnuts. Sometimes
Hmm.
I think we're basically in a post-processing. Most of our operation is post-processing, but then when we're cooking them and selling them, I think we've starting to cross that line. Into sales of a cooked product. And I'm just wondering if there's
Mm,
any like intermediate levels of commercial kitchen or something that's like more akin to sales of cooked food at a farmer's market or something like that. And if there's any kind of gray areas within that kind of cooked
yeah.
food.
Well, like for a cooked food that's going to be sold direct to consumer at a farmer's market, that's like usually comes under the food code instead. And there's an like that's regulated by your Board of Health. You're in Sunderland.
Hmm.
Yeah. So like that would be directly through that Board of Health, and it may just have to be like an inspection under the food code as opposed to a packaged food product. There's sort of like a weird gray area between like I think about pickles as an example of this. Like sometimes you'll see people at an event where they have like a bucket of pickles and people can like get a pickle and eat it, and it's sort of like this is like it's a prepared food meant to be consumed in the moment. Right,
Hmm.
as opposed to a packaged thing that you're taking home and consuming at a later date. That's a gray area. And so it's hard, that's a hard one to answer, but I'm betting you can get away with a lot less regulation if it's something that you're cooking and selling direct to consumer, even if it's like they're eating it the next day.
Yeah, and we would work with the Board of Health on that.
hmm I would think that would be actually mostly outside of state and FDA regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's my
Thanks.
sense.
Thanks. Just one quick question more about your work there,
hmm
and whether you all also offer any kind of product um, financial assessment or cost assessment.
Do you mean
Or
like to help understand, like to do a cost analysis of what it costs to make a product?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what I have a tool that I use with people to do a cost of goods analysis for packaged food products. So we look at like ingredients, packaging, labor, overhead to kind of and yield of a production day to sort of get us to a cost per unit. So I do
Mm.
have a really good
Mhm.
tool. I'm happy to send it along. You can look at it and then I'm happy to talk through it. It's not all that sophisticated necessarily, but I think it does a good job. It gets a little
Mhm.
complex, I feel like, to do a cost analysis when you're manufacturing more than one thing in a day. So this tool is sort of designed to say, like, we made tomato sauce, we made 1,000 jars.
Mhm.
It gets
Mhm.
trickier when you're like, all right, we made 1,000 jars, but half of them were this size and or whatever. We packed five of them
Yeah,
into gallons. So we can work on the sheet to make that work for the product, but sometimes it's imperfect, I guess.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll share that with you. I think I have your email.
Yeah, I have yours as well, and I could send you a note just to ping you with
Yeah,
mine. Great, super, thank you.
you're welcome. The other thing I will say is that we have lots of amazing partners. And Carrot Project is a great organization in Mass. They serve actually farms, I think, in like Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Mass. And they're like very strong on the financial advising. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's something to consider too, is like, would you want to do some work with them as coaches? Because they'll do a very deep dive financial analysis with you on a product idea. I just
Yeah,
worked with them. They were working with this guy, a farmer trying to do sofrito, and just developed all of these really wonderful tools. It was essentially one spreadsheet with many, many tabs, but allowed him to just do like a cost analysis, and then all of these other like it was like a scenario planning document. And even though he's not like quite ready to sell the sofrito, like he can then go back and use that when he is ready. So they're a
yeah,
great resource.
super. Great, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I put a link to the Cornell Food Venture Center. They're in New York. They're fantastic. They approve acidified food products. They also do shelf life testing, but you can look and get a sense of their services. Again, the University of Maine does similar things. And then there's a lab in Connecticut that we really like called Alliant Food Safety Labs that offers the same services, and they tend to work a little bit faster. Put that in here too. And yeah, I know that the slides will be shared with you after today. I actually still need to send those to you guys, but I'll send those as soon as we wrap up so you can have access to them. And then, yeah, happy to take a meeting with anybody at any point in the next 3 to 6 months.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. If there is no other question, I think we are going to end the session for today, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week, same day, same time, for the third course.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me. See you next week.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Mhm.